She was not the kind of girl who did bold things without thinking. She usually thought too much. About what to say, about how to say it, about what people might think after she said it. But this time felt different. She had noticed him slowly. It wasn't love at first sight or anything dramatic like that. It started with small things, a simple good morning, a shared laugh during a team meeting, the way he listened when she spoke, like her words actually mattered. They worked in the same office building but in different departments. Sometimes they crossed paths near the coffee machine, sometimes in the elevator, and every time there was this small pause, a quiet moment, like both of them wanted to say something more but didn't. She started looking forward to those little moments. She would tell herself she wasn't, but she was. One afternoon they both reached for the same paper cup near the water dispenser. Their hands almost touched. They both laughed. It wasn't a big scene, but it stayed in her mind the whole day. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. "Why doesn't he just ask me out?" she whispered to herself. Her friends had already noticed something was going on. During lunch breaks, they teased her gently. "If he likes you, he'll ask," one of them said confidently. "Yeah, just wait," another added. "Guys usually make the first move." She nodded, but something about that didn't sit right with her. Why should she just wait? She knew he liked talking to her. She could feel it. The eye contact lasted a little longer than normal. He asked about her weekend. He remembered small details about her stories. That meant something. But weeks were passing, and nothing was happening. One evening, she stayed late at work to finish a report. The office was quiet. Most lights were off. As she packed her bag, she saw him near the exit. "You're still here?" he asked with a small smile. "Yeah, too much work," she replied. They walked out together. The air outside was cool and calm. The parking lot was almost empty. For a moment, it felt like the world had slowed down just for them. He told her about a funny thing that happened in his department that day. She laughed. Not the polite kind of laugh, the real one. Then there was silence. Not awkward, just quiet. Her heart started beating faster. This is it, she thought. Maybe he will say something now. But he didn't. He just smiled and said, "All right, see you tomorrow." And that was it. She got into her car and sat there for a full minute before turning the key. Something inside her felt frustrated. Not angry. Just tired of waiting. On the drive home, she kept thinking about all the times she had waited in life. Waited for someone to choose her. Waited for someone to say what she already felt. Waited for permission to speak. Why? She was not a child. She was not helpless. She knew what she felt. The next morning, she looked at herself in the mirror a little longer than usual. Not to fix her hair, not to adjust her clothes, but to gather courage. "You can do this," she told her reflection softly. At work, she tried to act normal, but inside, she had already decided. If she got a good moment, she would ask him, not in a dramatic way. Not in front of everyone. Just simple, direct. Around lunchtime, she saw him standing near the window with a cup of tea. Sunlight was falling across his face. He looked relaxed. Her feet started walking before her brain could stop them. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied, smiling. They talked about random things for a few minutes. Work, traffic, the weather. Her throat felt dry, but she didn't want to lose the moment. So she took a small breath and said, very calmly, "I was thinking, Would you like to grab coffee with me sometime? Outside work, I mean. There. It was out. The words didn't sound as scary as she thought they would. For 1 second, everything was normal. Then she saw his face change. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disgust. It was surprise. Pure surprise. His eyebrows lifted slightly. His smile faded, not completely, but enough for her to notice. His eyes searched her face like he was trying to understand if she was joking. "Oh," he said. Just that. She forced a small smile. "Yeah, just coffee." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He glanced around quickly, even though no one was paying attention to them. I didn't expect that," he said slowly. Her heart dropped just a little. "It's fine," she added quickly. "I just thought it would be nice." He gave a short laugh, but it didn't feel natural. "Yeah, I mean, maybe. I'll see. Things are a bit busy right now." That word felt heavier than it should have. She nodded. "Sure. No pressure." The conversation ended soon after. Not badly, but not warmly either. As she walked back to her desk, her mind replayed the look on his face. That moment when he looked at her like she had done something unusual. Like she had crossed a line that wasn't written anywhere, but still existed. She sat down and stared at her computer screen. The numbers on the spreadsheet blurred together. Did I do something wrong? She wondered. All she did was ask for coffee. People ask each other out all the time. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was simple. But the way he reacted made it feel like she had broken some silent rule. The rest of the day felt strange. He avoided eye contact. Not completely, but enough for her to notice. He didn't come by her desk like he sometimes did. He didn't make any jokes in the hallway. And that hurt more than she expected. Not because he didn't say yes, but because of the way he looked at her. Like she had surprised him in the wrong way. That evening she sat on her bed, scrolling through her phone but not really seeing anything. Her mind was loud. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I seemed too eager. Maybe he thinks I'm desperate. The word made her stomach twist. Was it desperate to be honest? She remembered all the movies she had watched growing up. The guy always made the move. The girl always waited. Smiled softly, dropped hints, pretended not to care too much. She had skipped all that. She had simply said what she wanted. And somehow, that felt like a mistake. But deep inside, beneath the embarrassment, there was something else too. A small voice that said, "At least you were brave." She didn't regret asking. She regretted the way it made her doubt herself. As she turned off the lights and lay down, she stared into the darkness. Tomorrow would be awkward. She knew that. But she also knew something important. For the first time in her life, she didn't wait to be chosen. She chose. And even if the world looked at her like she had broken a rule, she knew one thing clearly. The rule was never written down. The next morning felt heavier than usual. She woke up earlier than her alarm, her mind already replaying yesterday's moment. That single word, "Bo." It echoed again and again. For a second she considered calling in sick, just to avoid the awkwardness. Just to avoid seeing that look again. But she pushed the thought away. Running would make it worse. So she got ready slowly. She chose a simple outfit. Nothing too bright, nothing too noticeable. She didn't want attention. Not today. When she entered the office, everything looked normal. People typing, Phones ringing. The sound of chairs moving. But for her, it felt different. She saw him near the entrance, talking to someone from his team. Her heart jumped slightly, but she kept walking. She didn't want to look like she was searching for him. As she passed by, their eyes met for a brief second. He gave a polite nod. Just a nod. Not the warm smile from before. And that small difference felt loud. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but her focus was gone. She wasn't angry at him. That surprised her. She expected to feel upset or defensive. Instead, she felt exposed, like she had shown something personal, and he had stepped back. Around midday, one of her friends at work noticed her quiet mood. "You okay?" her friend asked softly. "Yeah," she replied quickly, "just tired." But later, during lunch, she couldn't hold it in. "I asked him out," she admitted. Her friend's eyes widened. "You did? What happened?" The question, the pause, the look, the maybe. Her friend leaned back in her chair. "Well, maybe he was just surprised." "Surprised like that?" she asked quietly. Her friend hesitated. "Some guys aren't used to that." That sentence stayed with her. Not used to that. Not used to what? A woman speaking clearly? A woman taking initiative? The more she thought about it, the more something inside her shifted. Later that afternoon, she saw him again near the printer. This time, he couldn't avoid conversation. "Hey," he said. "Hey." There was an awkward pause. About yesterday, he almost said something, but then stopped. She waited. "I've just had a lot on my mind," he finished instead. She nodded. "It's okay." But it didn't feel okay. It felt unfinished. Over the next few days, the distance between them became noticeable. Not dramatic. Just subtle. He didn't linger near her desk anymore. Their conversations became shorter, more formal. And that hurt more than a direct rejection would have. She started questioning everything. Maybe I ruined it. Maybe if I had waited, he would have asked. Maybe he liked the chase. Maybe I made it too easy. The thoughts were exhausting. One evening, she went for a long walk alone. The sky was turning orange, and the air felt calm. She needed space to think clearly. Why did his reaction bother her so much? Was it because he said no? No. He never actually said no. It was the look. The look that said, "This is not how it's supposed to happen." That was what stung. She realized something important during that walk. She wasn't embarrassed because she asked him out. She was embarrassed because he reacted like she shouldn't have. There was a difference. And that difference mattered. The next day at work, something unexpected happened. He approached her desk. "Can we talk for a minute?" he asked. Her heart beat faster, but she stayed calm. "Sure." They stepped aside to a quieter corner. He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly nervous. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. She didn't interrupt. I've never had that happen before," he admitted. "No one's ever asked me out like that." She waited. "I guess I didn't know how to react," he continued. "It caught me off guard." Not rejection, discomfort. She studied his face carefully. He didn't look annoyed. He looked unsure. "I wasn't trying to make you uncomfortable," she said gently. "I know," he replied quickly. "It's not that. I just felt, I don't know, Like I was supposed to be the one to do that. Supposed to. That word again. She felt something inside her settle, so it wasn't about her being too much. It was about him feeling out of place. I didn't think there was a rule, she said softly. He gave a small, awkward smile. Yeah, I guess there isn't. Silence filled the space between them, but this time it wasn't heavy. I do like talking to you, he added. I just needed a second to process. She appreciated the honesty. It didn't erase the awkward days. It didn't magically fix everything, but it gave her clarity. He wasn't rejecting her. He was adjusting. And whether that adjustment would lead to something or fade away, she didn't know yet. But one thing was clear now. She hadn't done anything wrong. She hadn't crossed a line. She had simply stepped outside, a pattern he was used to. And maybe that felt uncomfortable. But uncomfortable didn't mean incorrect. As she walked back to her desk after that conversation, she felt lighter. Not because she had won. Not because he suddenly changed. But because she understood. She didn't break a rule. She revealed one. And whether he could grow past it or not was up to him. But she would never go back to waiting silently again. Not after this. After their conversation near her desk, things felt calmer on the surface. He had explained himself. He said he was surprised. He said he needed time. He said there was no rule. But even with that clarity, something inside her was still unsettled. Because explanations don't always remove feelings. For a few days, they spoke normally again. Small jokes, light conversations, nothing too deep. It almost felt like things were going back to how they were before she asked him out. Almost. But she noticed something had changed inside her. Before, she used to look at him with hope, with curiosity, with excitement about what might happen. Now, she looked at him with awareness. She started observing more than dreaming. She noticed how he acted around other people, how he laughed loudly with his team, how confident he looked when he was leading a discussion, how easily he spoke when he felt in control. But when things were slightly unexpected, like when she asked him out, he hesitated. That thought stayed with her. One afternoon, while they were both in the pantry area waiting for the microwave, he asked casually, "So, about that coffee?" Her heart skipped slightly, but she kept her expression steady. "Yeah. I was thinking maybe we could go this weekend," he said, "if you're still interested." The words felt careful. She smiled softly. "Sure." It wasn't a big reaction. No dramatic excitement. Just calm agreement. They decided on a small cafe not too far from their office. Simple, public, easy. When Saturday came, she woke up feeling strangely peaceful. Not nervous, not overly excited. Just steady. She wore something comfortable. Not too dressed up, not too casual. She didn't want to impress. She just wanted to be herself. When she arrived at the cafe, he was already there, sitting near the window. He stood up when he saw her. For a moment, she saw the version of him she had first liked. Warm, attentive, slightly shy. They ordered coffee and sat down. At first, the conversation was light. Work stories, weekend plans, movies, music. But slowly the topic shifted. "I've been thinking about what happened," he said, stirring his cup even though the sugar had already dissolved. She listened quietly. "I guess I realized I care too much about how things are supposed to look," he admitted. "When you asked me out, I felt like I lost my role for a second." "Your role?" she asked gently. "Yeah, like I was supposed to lead that part." And when you did it, I didn't know how to respond without feeling strange. She nodded slowly. I didn't mean to make you feel strange, she said. I know, he replied quickly. It's just how I've always seen things. That honesty mattered. But as he spoke, she started noticing something else. He kept explaining why he felt uncomfortable. He kept talking about his perspective, his adjustment, his confusion. He never once asked how she felt that day, not when she walked back to her desk, replaying his reaction. Not during the awkward silence over the next few days. Not now. That realization was quiet but powerful. Still, she chose to speak openly. When you looked at me like that, she said carefully, I felt like I had done something wrong. He looked surprised. Wrong? No, I didn't mean that. I know you didn't mean to, she said. But that's how it felt. He leaned back slightly, thinking. I guess I didn't realize how my reaction looked, he admitted. She appreciated that answer. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't dismissive. But she also understood something deeper in that moment. Sometimes people don't mean to hurt you, but they still reveal something important about themselves. They continued talking for another hour. The atmosphere felt lighter than before, more honest. When they left the cafe, he walked her to our car. I'm glad you asked me, he said suddenly. She raised her eyebrows slightly. You are? Yeah, he said with a small smile. It forced me to think differently. But as she drove home, she asked herself an important question. Is thinking differently enough? Over the next few weeks, they went out 2 more times. Simple outings, nothing dramatic, and she started noticing patterns. He liked when she admired him, when she praised his ideas, when she laughed at his jokes. But when she disagreed politely, he became quiet. When she made plans first, he seemed less enthusiastic. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't rude. It was subtle. But she felt it. One evening during their 3rd outing, she told him about a career opportunity she was considering. It would mean taking on more responsibility, possibly even moving to another city in the future. Instead of excitement, his face tightened slightly. That sounds intense, he said. It's a good opportunity, she replied. Yeah, but wouldn't that make things complicated? He asked. Complicated how? She asked calmly. For us, he said. She paused. There was no us. Not officially. Not yet. But in his mind, he had already placed their potential future in a shape that suited him. And suddenly, she saw it clearly. He was not a bad person. He was not unkind. But he was comfortable in a structure where he led and she followed. And when that structure shifted, even slightly, he struggled. That night she lay awake again. But this time, her thoughts were clearer. She remembered how scared she felt before asking him out, how proud she felt after doing it. Even with the awkward reaction, she realized something important. Her courage that day wasn't about him. It was about her. And she didn't want to shrink that courage now just to keep him comfortable. The next time they met, she decided to be honest. I've been thinking, she said gently while they walked in a quiet park. About what? He asked. About us. He looked attentive. I feel like sometimes you're okay with me being confident, she continued, but only when it doesn't challenge how you see things. What do you mean? I mean, when I asked you out, it surprised you. When I talk about big goals, it makes you uneasy. I don't want to feel like I have to be smaller to fit. He was quiet for a long moment. I never asked you to be smaller, he said. You didn't say it, she replied softly. But sometimes it feels that way. The conversation wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no anger. Just two people realizing they might see the world differently. He cared about her. She could see that. But caring isn't always the same as being ready. As they stood there in the fading sunlight, she understood something deeply. She didn't break a rule when she asked him out. She simply showed who she was. And now she had to decide if he truly accepted that version of her. After their conversation in the park, things felt fragile. Not broken, just delicate. They continued talking, but both of them were more aware now, more careful. He tried to be more supportive. She noticed that. When she spoke about her goals, he listened more. When she made plans, he didn't hesitate as much. But sometimes growth feels natural, and sometimes it feels forced. One evening, they met after work for a simple walk. The sky was cloudy, and the air felt heavy, like rain was coming. He seemed thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. She stayed quiet. "I don't want you to feel like you have to shrink," he said. "That's not what I want." "I know," she replied gently. "But wanting and being ready are different." He looked at her carefully. "Do you think I'm not ready?" he asked. She took a slow breath. "I think you're used to things being a certain way," she said honestly, "and I don't fit that pattern." The honesty hung between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said something that surprised her. "When you asked me out and made me question my confidence," he admitted, "I always thought I was the kind of guy who leads. But when you took that step, I felt unsure." She listened closely. "It wasn't about you being wrong," he continued. "It was about me not knowing who I was in that moment." That was the most honest thing he had said so far, and she respected it. But she also realized something important. She didn't want to be with someone who felt lost just because she was strong. Strength shouldn't confuse someone who truly values you. "Thank you for telling me that," she said sincerely. He nodded. "I'm trying." She believed he was. But she also believed in something else. She believed she shouldn't have to pause her natural self so someone else could catch up. A few days later, she received official news about the career opportunity. It was real. A promotion. More responsibility. A chance to grow. She felt excited, proud, nervous in a good way. When she told him, he smiled, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "That's big," he said. "It is," she replied. "And you'd take it?" he asked. "If it's right for me, yes." He looked down at his hands. "And what about us?" There it was again. Us. But this time, she felt calm. "I can't decide my future based on a maybe," she said softly. He looked up at her. "So what are you saying?" She didn't rush her answer. "I'm saying I care about you," she began. "But I care about myself too, and I don't want to feel like my growth is something that scares the person I'm with." He was quiet, not defensive. Just thoughtful. "I don't want to hold you back," he said finally. "I know," she replied, "but sometimes people don't mean to hold you back. It just happens." The truth of that sentence felt heavy but honest. They both understood something in that moment. This wasn't about coffee anymore. It wasn't about who asked who out. It was about compatibility. About whether two people could grow side by side without feeling threatened. They stood there for a long time without speaking. Finally, he gave a small, sad smile. "You didn't break a rule." he said quietly. You just showed me I still had some growing to do. Her chest tightened slightly at his words. And that's okay, she said gently. They didn't end things with anger. They didn't end with drama. They ended with understanding. Over the next few weeks, they slowly drifted back into being just coworkers. Polite, respectful, kind. And she noticed something surprising. She didn't feel regret. She felt stronger. Because asking him out wasn't a mistake. It was a test. Not of his feelings, but of her courage. And she passed. She learned that confidence will sometimes make people uncomfortable. She learned that not everyone is ready for a woman who chooses instead of waits. But most importantly, she learned that she would never apologize for being brave again. The rule she thought she broke, it was never hers to follow in the first place, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace with that. Time has a quiet way of healing things that once felt heavy. A few months passed, after they slowly drifted back into being just coworkers. There was no big fight, no dramatic ending. Just a gentle distance that grew day by day. They still greeted each other in the hallway. They still exchanged polite smiles during meetings. But the spark that once made her heart beat faster had settled into something calm and neutral. And surprisingly, she was okay. At first, she thought she would feel regret. Maybe embarrassment. Maybe even shame when she remembered that day near the window, when she asked him for coffee and he looked at her like she had stepped outside an invisible line. But instead, when she remembered it now, she felt something else. Pride. Not loud pride. Not the kind that needs applause. Just a quiet inner pride that whispered, "You were brave." Her career opportunity moved forward. She accepted the promotion. The work became more challenging. Her days became busier. There were longer meetings, new responsibilities, and moments where she doubted herself in different ways. But these doubts felt different. They were about learning and growing, not about shrinking herself. One evening, while organizing her desk, she found a small sticky note where she had once written, "Should I wait?" She must have written it weeks ago during those confusing days. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she smiled and tore it in half. She no longer believed in waiting just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Around that time, something unexpected happened. A new person joined the company. Not in her department, but close enough that they would cross paths often. He wasn't flashy. He didn't try too hard to impress anyone. He simply did his work, asked thoughtful questions, and treated everyone with the same steady respect. The first time they spoke, it was about a project. Simple and professional. But unlike before, she didn't feel nervous about how she sounded. She didn't replay her words later. She didn't overthink her smile. She was just herself. Days turned into weeks. Their conversations slowly became longer. They discovered shared interests. They laughed over small office moments. And one afternoon, while walking out of the building together, she noticed something familiar. That small pause. That quiet moment where both people feel something but aren't sure who will speak first. This time her heart didn't race with fear. It felt calm. He looked at her and said, "I was thinking, would you like to grab dinner sometime?" She blinked in surprise, not because he asked, but because she realized something. If he hadn't asked, she would have. And that realization made her smile even more than his question did. "Yes," she replied. Simple, clear, no hesitation. As she walked to her car that evening, she thought about how different she felt compared to months ago. Back then, asking someone out felt like breaking a rule. Now, it just felt normal. Over dinner they talked openly about work, about goals, about family, about dreams that felt big and slightly scary. When she mentioned her career ambitions, he didn't tense up. He didn't look uncertain. Instead, he leaned forward and asked, "What excites you most about that?" That question stayed with her. What excites you? Not how will this affect me? Not is that too much? Not won't that make things difficult? Just curiosity. Just support. And in that moment, she understood something clearly. The right person will not feel threatened by your courage. They will admire it. A few weeks later, she ran into her old crush in the office lobby. It had been a while since they had spoken more than a polite greeting. "How have you been?" he asked. "Good," she said honestly. "Busy, but good." He nodded. "I heard about your promotion. That's impressive." "Thank you," she replied. There was no awkward tension anymore. No unfinished feelings hanging in the air. Just two people who had once tried and learned something. "I meant what I said before," he added quietly. "You didn't do anything wrong." She smiled softly. "I know." And she truly did. As she walked away from that conversation, she didn't feel like she had lost anything. She felt like she had gained clarity. That night, lying in bed, she thought about the title of her story in her mind. I asked him out first, and he looked at me like I'd broken a rule. It sounded dramatic, almost painful. But now it felt empowering. Because the rule she thought she broke was never about dating. It was about permission. Permission to speak first. Permission to choose. Permission to be bold without apology. She realized how many silent rules exist in everyday life. Rules about how women should act, how confident they should be, how much space they should take, how patient they should remain. And without even planning to, she had stepped outside one of those lines. Not perfectly, not without doubt, not without overthinking. But she stepped anyway. That mattered. Her new relationship grew slowly and naturally. There were no power games, no unspoken expectations about who should lead and who should follow. Sometimes she made plans, sometimes he did. Sometimes they disagreed, but disagreements didn't feel like threats. They felt like conversations. One evening, months later, they were sitting on a rooftop watching the city lights. "You seem very sure of yourself," he said casually. She laughed softly. "Not always. It feels like you are," he replied. She thought about that. "I wasn't always," she admitted. "I learned." And she appreciated that too, because her growth didn't need to be explained in detail to be valid. As the night grew quieter, she reflected on how much she had changed. The girl who once lay awake worrying if she looked desperate had become someone who understood her own worth. The girl who once replayed a single expression for days had learned that someone else's discomfort is not always your fault. The girl who once questioned if she should wait now knew that waiting is a choice, not a requirement. She didn't become fearless overnight. She didn't stop caring what people thought, but she stopped letting those thoughts control her actions. And that was enough. If she could go back and speak to herself on that day near the window, when she took a deep breath and said, "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" she would say only one thing: "I'm proud of you." Because sometimes growth doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing. And even if someone looks at you like you've broken a rule, that doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes it just means the rule was outdated. As she closed her eyes that night, she felt calm. Not because everything in life was perfect, but because she no longer needed permission to be brave. And that quiet confidence stayed with her long after the coffee, long after the awkward look, long after the rule she thought she had broken disappeared completely.